Hi, and welcome to day 3, the last day of Microsoft Ignite. I'm Steve Goodman. Hi, Paul.
Hi, Steve. How are you?
I'm not bad. How's things with you?
They're going well. I heard you had a pizza on the way, which is something that's pretty hard to do at Ignite when there are 30,000 other people all competing for the same 10 pizza drivers. So well played on that.
Oh,
Uh, let-
I went back to the hotel and ordered it there.
I'd like everybody at home to know I'm wearing my throwback Exchange logo shirt back when these used to be a thing that you had to wear at Microsoft events when you were speaking. If you were speaking about Exchange, you had to wear the Exchange shirt or people would yell at you. So I figured to get into the spirit of the event, I would dress appropriately.
Actually, I did a session on Office 365 tenant migrations wearing this T-shirt. That's 2 years ago. That shows I should still wear the same clothes every day. I didn't put it on specially either.
I don't believe I would have admitted that if I were you.
You know when you start talking and then you should stop. I bought a similar one to this last year in Orlando, and my friend, fellow MVP Jason Wynn, was with me. And he went, "That really looks like a Steve Goodman T-shirt." So,
Okay, well,
I don't even know what that means.
all right. So what should we talk about today? Ignite
So,
for 2020 is in the books, and we have some more wrap-up items to talk about.
yes. So I dug out a few more interesting things from some of the sessions, and I'll just put this on screen now. This you may have already heard about, but the detail of this is quite interesting, at least I think, anyway, where the transcription part for meetings I hadn't really focused on. And if I zoom into this here, you'll see the transcription looks really, really good compared to what we've seen before in things like Stream. And we did see this a little bit in things like the demos and so on. But up close, this looks really good, where your normal transcription in a meeting is going to show the people that are talking. And I just think that is absolutely super. The other part of this is we're also going to see this for in calls for transcription. We'll be able to do call recording on normal one-to-one calls as well. What do you think?
You know, it's a neat idea. I think if you think of this as a piece of the meeting recap feature that Microsoft announced, this is really great. I have to admit, I think it's a little creepy, the idea that I'm in a one-on-one call and I can record it and turn this on. I get that you only get the transcription when you are recording.
Yeah.
But in some ways, you know, that's really it's a fine distinction, because there's no technical reason why Microsoft couldn't be transcribing these calls without actually recording them. And I know they don't, and I'm not trying to suggest that they do or will or want to. But the fact that technically they could, that sort of creeps me out a little bit. I have visions of, you know, this giant NSA data center in Utah, which exists, siphoning data out and making a real-time transcript of every single Teams meeting in the world. That didn't sound like such a great thing. But, you know, leaving paranoid James Bond fantasy stuff aside.
Yeah, leave that aside, please.
Okay. I'll tell you one use case where this is immediately going to be very useful. I work with a large international team.
Yeah.
And for some people, me included, when I am listening to a speaker in one of the languages that I claim to speak, sometimes it's much easier for me to follow along with written material and PowerPoint slides or a transcript than it is to decipher what they're saying on the fly. So for a mixed audience, even being able to get an English transcription of an English speaker is really going to be helpful to include people who maybe are speaking English as a second or third or fourth language. And Microsoft's already said they'll be adding other languages in the future. And so I think this feature is going to get more and more useful as they expand it like that.
I mean, I would point out live captions doesn't require you to record the meeting.
Good point.
So
you're right.
Maybe that, because obviously, as you can see on the screen there, the live captions feature is showing the speaker at the same time, then that it might not need to actually record it to do it. But one point is that if it is a call between two people, then that usually is a peer-to-peer if it can. Whereas this, I would expect, is either going to have to do it in the Teams client, which, as we know, is very web-based. So I think that they've either brought the bit of the Skype stack which lives on-prem,
Mm.
to include this transcription feature within the client itself, which is probably less likely, or it will have to go through a cloud media encoder as part of this to be able to do that. So it is going to end up putting a one-to-one call through the cloud, I'd suspect.
Right.
But of course, that will go locally to your local data center if you are in region. So if you are in Singapore, you're in the UK, it isn't going to go through an NSA data center. You're in the UK, just GCHQ or something like that.
So far as we know, right? Of course, that's not going to happen. That would be wrong and bad.
So there'll be some interesting things. For example, if you are making a call through your local PSTN and it's going out through direct routing, all of the kind of media offload stuff, how's that going to work with this? That'll come out in the wash, I expect. The other interesting one is the Survivable branch appliance. So you don't want anyone snooping in on your calls. Well, unplug the internet and Teams will carry on working. So there's something here. I've highlighted this from the session. It's called Teams offline mode. So now that's new to me. Had you heard of that before?
I had not, and that's a pretty interesting. I know what all those words mean by themselves, but when you put them together, that's something we really haven't seen Microsoft talk a lot about before. Teams is the thing that is always on.
Absolutely,
right?
Yeah.
All of the services and capabilities that it offers are all based in the cloud, and the client sort of loses its mind and puts up one of those stupid Fisher-Price dialogues when it can't connect that says something like, "Oh, the internet's just not the same without you." So having a real offline mode is a significant improvement.
Yeah, and Teams improved a little bit in recent months, where if you're offline and it's running, then it'll say offline. You can't send messages and so on.
Right.
They have improved what was the original puff, as if the power's been pulled. What this is going to do, though, on the SBC, the session border controls, it's going to run a virtual machine, a little bit like you would have done with the Skype for Business, where you had a survivable branch appliance. And in the future, the peer-to-peer calling will work as well. So, what one thing people do like with a phone system is if the internet breaks and they've got a separate SIP trunk, or they've got ISDN, PSTN line hitting an on-premises session border controller, they do want to be able to still make calls if they lose access to Teams, because that the phone system reliability is often desired to be more so than co-authoring on a document and so on. So I think that's great news, and that'll be paired with things like these new phones. Customers are still buying desk phones. I think some of the cheapest ones before now retailed at, I'd say, let's call it the same in dollars and pounds, about 120, 130 pounds or dollars. This is taking these down to full network connected phones at a cheaper price on the right, and bring your own phone, which was previously announced, and we'll expect those within the next 9 months. So when they're due, should be towards the end of the first half of next year.
I'm really torn about this. On the one hand, it's very difficult to get excited about black plastic phones, right?
Yeah.
I mean, no less a person than Jamie Stark, whose Twitter handle is "No More Phones." The LCS Link Skype team has been telling us for a long time that people don't want to have desk phones, but we know that's not true, don't we? I mean, people. There's a subset of people who want. Well, of course, you would have one. They actually want a physical phone that they can pick up and dial, and there are a lot of use cases where the phone isn't assigned to a person; it's in a conference room, a waiting room, and so on. It's going to be very interesting to see how these appear in the marketplace, because one wonders if the cost of the phones is really what has been slowing their deployment. In other words, do people say, well, 120 pounds is too much, but I would buy one for 80 pounds? Maybe. I think lowering that price floor is going to pick up some customers who would not have bought phones otherwise. But in some ways, the problem with phones is really when you have a phone, now you have another physical thing. You have to account for it. You have to manage it. You have to fix it if it breaks, and so on. And I think one of the big advantages of Teams and Skype and so on is a device you already have, like your laptop or your mobile phone, can take the place of this separate artifact. So we'll see. I look forward to seeing how these are adopted in the market.
Yeah, and I one of the problems people have had working from home has been they've not had the right, decent devices, and a decent device can cost you £80.
Easily, sure.
And a phone like this one here, if this was £150, then that is about the same price as this headset that I'm wearing now. But it's not as good quality. The speakerphone, it's got a speakerphone in it. It's okay. It's not market leading. The audio quality on a handset, it isn't as good as what you're hearing now on this video. It sounds like a phone. It's better than a 20-year-old phone, but it's the same sort of quality you'd get with your Cisco phone or something like that. It's not perfect, but you can deploy them easily to people. They're reliable and they're easy to use. So, should we have a look at some of the last couple of announcements? One of the ones that I thought was interesting is being able to transfer calls to your mobile device easily from the desktop as you head out the door.
Yes.
That's going to be useful to me. I go on school run every day. I effectively do this quite often, and a better mobile experience as well. Together mode coming, and the large gallery view. Seen some of this already myself. More videos in meetings, 3x3, 2x4, 8 videos. And if you've been in a meeting, if you wanted to unmute yourself and you have to tap the screen, then you won't have to tap the screen anymore. The controls will always be there, which is nice.
I actually like my first thought when I saw that Microsoft was planning on doing this is I thought, well, it's a bit pants. I don't really want to look at 6 or 8 people on my mobile phone. But when you think about the use case for the gap between, the other day we talked about these giant Surface Hub, multi-dollar systems, let's just say.
Yeah.
They're very capable. And then you can step down from there to an ordinary MTR. You can step down from there to a laptop with a webcam. Microsoft has made a lot of talk about collaboration bars, which I think now have been renamed to something like Microsoft Teams Systems for Android or something. I don't remember the exact name, but I remember seeing Android in the title and thinking, well, that's kind of special.
Microsoft Teams Rooms, Android, and Windows.
Okay, good. I love the idea that I can go out and I can buy a reasonable tablet and turn it into a more or less dedicated Teams device and still get a gallery view and call controls and the other good parts of the experience. I think for a home office, like we talked about the other day, it may not make sense to put a dedicated device at large scale, but certainly most places would be willing to splash out $300, $400 for some tier of their employees to have a dedicated meeting device that just happened to be an iPad or a Galaxy Tab or something like that. So it'll be interesting to see whether people do that.
We didn't mention it because it's already been announced, but they do have the new form factor. It's effectively, similar to this, but the screen is the entire device. It's a speakerphone with a screen and a camera on, and it gives you the meeting experience. And that's aimed at that personal meeting device. Bit like an Echo Show, basically, but for Teams. I'm going to just change a gear for the last couple of things. And
okay, let's do it.
One of these, there's a really, really good presentation to watch. I'll put the link to it. One of these to watch is definitely the Azure Id Robot. It's wonderfully presented. It's full of demos. It's very, very good. And there's some really useful stuff. So I talked in an article a couple of weeks ago about one of the risks to your tenant being people consenting to applications that were malicious. And you do need to try and protect against that. And this is giving a middle ground where you can protect against it. but also allow people to accept genuine applications, because they're going to do publisher verification and policies on the user consent. And I'll show this on the screen here, where a user will be able to, or an admin will be able to choose to only allow consent from particular, just show this on screen for you, to only allow consent from particular publishers. I think that's a really good thing. And the other interesting thing would be that the user will get a notification, and it will say right here whether it's verified or unverified.
So the thing about this, and I understand why Microsoft is doing this, they've been beating the drum and telling developers and ISVs that they should use Azure AD enterprise apps. And that's gotten to the point now where if you use an application that in the past would have just attached to your mailbox or logged into your Azure AD account, now it very well may have its own dedicated app. So for example, the Mac OS and iOS calendar application called Fantastical has its own Azure AD app.
Yeah.
And you can't use it if your tenant does not allow you as a user to consent to the app, because it doesn't use EWS or Graph or any other mechanism. It uses the Azure AD permission structure to get the Graph endpoint to attach. And so if you can't consent, you can't use it. So that's problem number one, is the more successful Microsoft is with getting ISVs to build these apps, the bigger the problem gets for the poor admin who has to click through this very long list of requests saying, please approve this random app that I've never heard of. The other thing is, I'm sorry, when I look at this dialogue, the percentage of users who will read and understand what this says and pay attention to it and not just blindly click accept.
Yeah.
We already know how small that is. If it weren't small, we wouldn't have ransomware. There's a long list of bad things that we wouldn't have if users had not been trained to just accept as soon as they see a dialogue like that. So cool. I give Microsoft props for doing it. It's the right thing to do, but I don't think we should assume it's going to make a measurable difference in the actual security that we see delivered, unless users really start paying attention to that unverified text.
Well, we've got that middle ground where you'll be able to go review these and decide what you want to do about them,
right.
But also say these permissions are fine for us to allow a verified publisher to add in. A few things coming up next. The bottom one being most interesting here, and that is secure collaboration for multi-tenant organizations. So that sounds interesting, from potentially tenant-to-tenant moves and migrations. Also that long-term coexistence story as well. Been waiting a long time for this, if it's what it could be anyway.
Well, when I think back, again, old guy wearing an Exchange shirt, when I think back to what the most critical pieces of multi-tenant collaboration have been historically, the first was mail flow, right?
Yes.
That got solved in about 1993, 1994, right? GAL synchronization, which is still not really well solved, and FreeBusy. So when you think about, okay, what comes next? Well, the next things are, think of all the things you can do with Teams, OneDrive, SharePoint, lists, all those things. Where do you want to see those things plugging into each other? How should they work? And the Azure AD team has got to do the work to enable those. I don't want to call them trust relationships, because that has a very specific meaning, but you have to have a way to allow organizations to specify what kind of access they require from their collaborating peers and what kind of access they're willing to grant. And then once that's done, that unleashes all the things that M365 and the Power Platform and Dynamics can do. So good news, bad news. There's a lot of preparation work that has to be done to get the ground ready to build the stadium. But once the Azure AD team has done that, then I'm really excited to see what the application folks are able to come up with to build on top of that. I'm
guessing that Quadratech by Weaver is going to be all over this, because it's such a problem you see on tenant-to-tenant migrations. So I'll be interested to see how vendors fit in, because that my customers will want to see how this can facilitate those slower mergers, that longer-term coexistence.
Right.
And it's particularly challenging if two organizations come together and they need to be able to cross-pollinate guests across, especially if they went and bought a random third-party gouging tool that's just doing contracts. And finally, we know when the next Ignite is going to be.
So bold move on Microsoft's part. It's going to be in the spring, which means they are cutting down the amount of runway they have to get things ready for the next event. That tells me, and the use of the word join Microsoft Ignite instead of attend Microsoft Ignite, it's obviously going to be virtual.
Yeah.
But as we've said repeatedly, I think the Microsoft team did a superb job planning and executing and running this virtual event. I think it's a great proof point that shows that, yes, they can do this. It can be valuable to attendees. It can be valuable to Microsoft. I was skeptical, and now I'm much less so. So if we're going to have a virtual event in, 6 months? A little bit less than that, I suppose. It's close to 6 months. That means Microsoft has got a lot to do, because one of the traditional measuring sticks at Ignite is, did Microsoft deliver what they said they would deliver at last Ignite? So they don't have a lot of time for some of these things. They better get busy.
I mean, last year they were rolling into Ignite the Tour, which was often a bit of repeat, but we also got the people from the product group giving some new news as they went along. So I think they geared up for it. And I agree, I think it went really, really well. I was kind of expecting it to be almost like when you used to follow Tech Ed and see the sessions come on Channel 9. This worked better than that. It did feel it. I liked the sessions that were broadcast during the day live weren't immediately online, and you've got a plan to go to them, rather than if you miss them, you can just watch them later. And that mix of that and on-demand content worked really well for me. And I know I'm going to be coming back for more content over the coming days as well. What about you?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, the ability to dip into this whole corpus of content and go back and watch things that you missed, or one of the biggest advantages and disadvantages of on-prem Ignite is you get to talk to your friends, your peers, your coworkers, and find out what sessions they went to that they thought were valuable.
Yeah.
The problem is, though, by the time you find that out, when I'm at the pub drinking a beer with you on day 2, and you tell me about this great session you went to, unless it's repeated, now I have to wait for the recording. We don't have that problem anymore. I can go through and survey the entire group of MVPs and, other people that I work with and talk and listen to. And anytime one of them says, oh, hey, this session was really great. Oh, this person did a great presentation about, whatever it is. Now I have the opportunity to go back and get that information in a way that is much more difficult for on-prem Ignite. And it's easier for Microsoft too. Having to record all of the sessions live inevitably meant that there were compromises. There were some things they couldn't or wouldn't record just because they didn't have enough, enough labor and equipment to be able to do it. Well, don't have that problem anymore.
I wonder whether when they go back to in person, it might be a new thing where you record your session ahead of time, and then they don't record them on the day. Could be a way of simplifying it.
I will say this. I think that your average 11 or 12-year-old right now is going to have a huge amount of fertile material if they decide to get a degree in sociology. Yeah. In 10 or 12 years, when they look back and see all the pivotal changes for something like how large industry and educational conferences are held. Because you're right, Microsoft could do that. I'm not anywhere near smart enough to predict what Ignite 2021 will look like, right? I mean, so much is changing so fast. I'm just going to wait and see.
We will be back in a week's time for the
Yes, we will.
365 podcast. See if I can convince you to do a video with me again as well. We'll see.
It depends. Is there going to be pizza? I like pizza.
I can try and order one for you, yeah.
Yeah, good luck with that.
So tune in next time. Thanks very much for following Ignite 2020 along with us, and we'll see you soon.
See you next time. Thanks, everybody.